would like to introduce to you a good friend of mine who I've had the pleasure to work with at our National Assembly, the Assembly of First Nations. He's the elected regional chief for Manitoba, the executive of the AFN, made up of the national chief, Perry Bellegarde, and regional chiefs from every territory and every province across this country. The advocacy voice for First Nations across this land. Kevin's been involved in a very passionate way on issues relating to missing and murdered women, issues relating to children, child family services, child family community services. Just all around good guy. Very good and very strong advocate for the work that's being undertaken nationally, but here in this region as well. So my friend Kevin.
Check 1 2. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to a balmy minus 40 degrees this morning. I understand, welcome to Treaty 1 territory, obviously. I want to acknowledge the prayer that was offered up by Elder Norman Mead this morning. Thank you, brother. It's always good to see you again. And also to acknowledge our brother from the Dakota Nation, who does his great work here at the University of Manitoba as well. I want to acknowledge Miriam, who has traveled a long way. She is our chair of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. So we're very glad to have her here this morning. We also have Victoria Corpez here, who's the special rapporteur on Indigenous issues here. So, we have people from all over the world that have traveled here to be with us here over the next couple days. I've seen people that are representing us from all over the world. I want to welcome you here. My understanding is one of our sisters traveled all the way from plus 35 yesterday, and then I believe now she's in minus 35 weather. There's a 70-degree difference in the weather for her here. So, we ask you, make sure you stay warm in that. I want to acknowledge Rye Moran as well as Grand Wilton Littlechild. I had the honor to work with Grand Chief Littlechild when he was at the TRC during that time, and I must say and commend the work that they did during that time, as well as one of my colleagues, Grand Chief Ed John, for coming all the way from the BC territory, as well as our brothers from the Métis, Will, as well as I see, I'm trying to differentiate between the two brothers, Dan, I believe. Al, damn it, I knew I was gonna, sorry about that, Al. I seen two brothers, when I seen the Benoit brothers, it's always Dan or Al, and it's, you have to always figure out which one is which. Sorry about that, brother. But I want to welcome you guys here this morning. Obviously when we talk about, for us, our national chief, he could not be here as well. So National Chief Perry Bellegarde obviously welcomes everybody this morning and lifts you all up from your respected territories. And for those who traveled all across the world to be here with us to talk about some very important issues, especially when it comes to Indigenous human rights. For myself as the regional chief for Manitoba, at the Assembly, at that national table, Manitoba is very unique when it comes to the human rights aspect. When we look at Canada, Manitoba is the worst when it comes to First Nation housing needs across this country. It's the worst when it comes to the water quality and safe drinking water in our communities as well as the infrastructure that goes with that. So, those are the top things when we think of Canada as champions out there in the world stage, that, we have to look within our own backyards. And for myself, being the regional chief of Manitoba, I made sure to bring that forward. And even on the international tables, I've let Ms. Corpez know about, the atrocities that are happening here in the Manitoba region when it comes to those specific things, when it comes to housing, water, and infrastructure. Now, if you flip the coin, we're also the worst in the country when it comes to the number of Indigenous children in care. And when we talk about Head Start programs and early learning and childcare programs on First Nations, we're the worst in the country as well too. So you could see how the battle is for us collectively when we're trying to fight for First Nations children, and especially our people. Because for me as the regional chief for Manitoba that holds very important national portfolios, you know, housing, water, infrastructure, emergency management. We can look back at the 2010 flood that occurred in Manitoba and the displacement of First Nation people to this day that are in the thousands. So that's still happening and occurring today. Now, if we look at the rights of our people and First Nation people, I'll use a good example when we talk about treatment of First Nations people versus Canadian society. Think about this for a second. There was a flood in the Alberta region, more specifically around the city of Calgary. Huge loss. But you know what happened? Is the government of Canada spent $1 billion to get the city of Calgary ready for the Calgary Stampede that summer. Meanwhile, for myself as the leader here in Manitoba, I'm fighting, you know, for the safety of our women and our children on the streets that have been, you know, displaced since 2010, 2011 floods. And, you know, we've had loss of life because of all the social determinants and such that affect our people. That has affected our people too. So in those aspects, you know, we've been fighting for human rights of our First Nation people here in Manitoba for a long time. And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. You know, when we look at the segment of society and the marginalization of First Nation people when it relates to law and that, and this is one of the biggest things that are coming right now, as you hear, is that the Indigenous people from First Nations, Metis and Inuit are working on child welfare legislation right now. And for us, this is important given the circumstances or what's happening right now and the realities here in Manitoba. So for you people that fight for human rights or in our law students and such, these are the people that we need with those fresh ideas, working with the people that have been there on the ground with their experiences too. You know, because we need to change those laws and those policies. You know, I don't want to start with a broken system because that system's been broken. We have to come up with our own ideas and our own new system to replace child welfare. Because for us at the end of the day, we have to replace that jurisdiction and resolve that jurisdiction that was torn away from our grandmothers and our mothers. That's the first jurisdiction when it comes to a child. You know, is that separation between the protectors of our circle, our women. That's one of our laws when we talk about those 7 principles as Elder Mead talked about this morning. And then and when you see contentious issues happening in Canada right now, classic example, we just have to look at our relatives from BC and what's happening now on the ground, right? So you have a hereditary system of law that's been there since time immemorial, and then we have an elected system that's basically through the Indian Act, through laws and policies of the Constitution and that, where we have elected leaders in such territories too. So you could see that the fight that we have right now, and you're seeing that it's creating division, is which one holds the most weight and impact right now? Is it our hereditary systems that have been in place since time immemorial, or is it the new Indian Act version of law and policy that dictates, you know, how we elect chiefs in our respected communities and how they're recognized, et cetera, et cetera. And for us, you know, we are based on a clan system here in Manitoba that, you know, unfortunately was lost, and it's not as strong as it would be, say, for example, from Grand Chief John's territories, where that fundamental principle of hereditary chiefs and that hereditary system are very strong today and rule within the land, the water, and the territories there. So you could see that for us, when it comes to human rights and especially law, you know, the weight of traditional hereditary law versus civil law, common law, you know, right? international law, because for us as First Nations, we've signed treaties that are internationally recognized nation to nation between then the British Crown and what is now known as the country of Canada, once the repatriation, of course, of the Constitution in 1982. And then, of course, we have different sections under that Constitution that affect us as First Nation people. You know, you look at Section 35 in that. But there's different articles within that Constitution and references that you have to look at that affect us overall as well, too, as First Nation and Indigenous people. So, you know, I don't want to go be long-winded. I just wanted to put that down as some of the facts, because I know you guys are going to be talking about some very important and critical issues that affect us, you know, all across Mother Earth, as we call it, because you could see it when we talk about, say, for example, climate change in the environment. It's the Indigenous people of the world that are leading the way there, based on those hereditary systems and laws, right, that have been passed down generation to generation since time immemorial. You know, and then we talk about that when we look at, say, the country of Canada right now. And when you see resource development, you see different Indigenous groups, you know, participating, and you see different First Nations participating, but then you also see rights holders who are First Nations people saying, no, we don't agree with this. So, you know, there has to come some kind of, for us as Indigenous people and as First Nations people, we have to come together and, you know, to make that decision, because, you know what, I'm a rights holder as a First Nations person. And it's solidified by the number that I'm registered on. You know, my number is 31301965001 to the Government of Canada. You know, for us as First Nations people, we see that as little Swiss bank accounts to the Government of Canada, because they know exactly how much money they're going to make off of us in a lifetime. So, in turn, I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about, you know, those basic principles that have been instilled, that are written in the trees. When you look at the birch trees, you know, there's stories behind that, how they talk about the bones of our people are written in there. When you look in Alberta, Chief's Mountain, that's hereditary, that's inherent. You know, when you talk about it, it's there. For us here in Manitoba, Manitoba is not far from here. Our laws, our principles are written in those petroglyphs that are there, as well as the chair where the Creator sat that doesn't sit from here. It sits in the northern Manitoba in the NCN Cree territory, where they have the footprints of the Creator on the side of the rock that's beside the river. And it's written in the stones and that. So you can talk about the very many things that our hereditary systems have been built on, and especially those principles and laws that have been passed down since time immemorial, as Elder Mead has indicated. So that's just a little bit I want to say to everybody, and I stress to you, be warm over the next couple days. Take some time. I want to welcome our visitors from all across Turtle Island, as well as Mother Earth, for coming here and being here and sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us. I want to acknowledge the panels and the experts that are here too, our colleagues and that from, you know, not only in the region, from all across Canada, because, you know, at the end of the day, we always have a common goal. And, you know, as our late elder Elmer Kershane said, you know, don't forget that all the work that you do is always for the little ones. And I instill that each and every day in the work that I do. So thank you, everybody. Hi.
Thank you, Kevin. I'd like to now introduce the Manitoba Métis Federation Minister, Will Goodon, from the Ministry of Housing and Property. He has built a career through a combination of community service and entrepreneurship. Will, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm not sure how to follow that. That was fantastic. Let's have a round of applause again for Kevin. That was fantastic. I always feel a little self-conscious when I'm following such accomplished speakers, and in fact, in front of a room of academics and people who are obviously quite a bit smarter than I am. Otherwise, I would probably be in the crowd there with you. As our chair said, as Grand Chief John said, my name is Will Goodon, and I am a Métis Nation citizen, first and foremost. As is always our tradition, I want to say thank you to our elder, Norman, who has served the Métis Nation his entire life, and that's something that he can be proud of, but we're very much proud of him as well. He is always present at all of our Métis Nation gatherings, and it's something that I think is very fortunate for us that we have someone like that to help us out and to guide us. One of the things we also provide thanks for is our veterans. And for me, that's a little bit personal today. On last Saturday, we lost my Uncle Frank. He was a Métis veteran of World War II. We are going to say goodbye to him tomorrow in our hometown in Boissevain. He was a World War II veteran, as I said. He saw action. He was in Normandy. He landed on D-Day, and he was a prisoner of war. And he was my uncle. He was 94 years old. And it's something that we want to say thank you to all of our veterans, in particular for us, our Métis Nation veterans, for their service for not only the Métis Nation, but for all of Canadians. As I said before, I'm a Métis Nation citizen. We're here talking about international issues. And just to put a little bit of personal spin on it, I'm from the Turtle Mountains. My family grew up there. My father grew up there. His father and mother grew up there. In fact, my grandmother was born on the American side of the Turtle Mountains. She was Métis, but she was registered with the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewas. And my grandfather was a Métis citizen from the Canadian side. Back then, it's a little bit different today. Back then, the border along the Turtle Mountains was a little bit more porous. You could kind of go back and forth along the international side, and that's how they met. And obviously, they raised a family on both sides of the American border. But I wanted to say, I wanted to provide a welcome as well. One of the things that we're very proud of here at the Red River, and that's how we refer to Winnipeg as Red River, is that this is the birthplace of the Métis Nation. And to be quite honest, it is still the heart of the Métis Nation homeland. I want to say thank you to our organizers who helped put this all together today. In particular, I want to say thank you to Celeste. I'm not sure if she's around here. There she is in the back. And Laura, two very strong Métis Nation women who are helping put this together today. One of the things that we are very proud of in our Métis governments is the strength of our Métis women. If you look at Canadian representatives in Parliament or the Senate, you look at the American system, you look at the provincial system, municipal, whatever, there's, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's not 50-50, even though Justin Trudeau is trying to get gender parity in his government. We have achieved that. The Métis Nation has achieved that, and we've done that ever since we started, back in 1967. If you look at our Métis Nation government here in Manitoba, at the Manitoba Métis Federation, it has been at least 50% and sometimes more women. And in fact, I would say that the strongest representatives in our Métis Nation government are my colleagues who are women, and it's something that we're very, very proud of today, and we have always been. I want to say thank you again to Kevin, thank you to Grand Chief John, and also I want to say, give a shout out. We had a couple of shout outs to Grand Chief Littlechild. I have some of the, we've all talked a little bit about some of our international experience. I got a wee little bit, back in '99, I was just maybe, I don't know, I was only 12 or 13 at the time. Just kidding. I had the opportunity to attend the United Nations conference talking about, at that time it was the draft declaration, and I had the opportunity to meet Willie Littlechild, and I had heard all these stories. At that time he was a giant, and today he's even more well respected. So I wanted to give a good little shout out to my friend Willie Littlechild. So also wanted to touch base on some of the, since we're talking about the international aspects and how Indigenous people are involved today and how we have been involved in the past. So right from the beginning, right from when the Métis Nation was, the genesis of the Métis Nation happened 200, 300, 400 years ago, we were an international people. We were born, as most people know, of the fur trade. The buffalo hunt was a major part of the economy of the Métis Nation, and both of these things were international in how they operated. So, and that was what some of the battles that we fought. We fought battles with Canada. We fought battles with the fur trading companies. We fought battles with other Indigenous peoples, and we signed treaties with other Indigenous peoples as well. But our international activities at the time, whether we were taking our Red River cart trains from Red River to St. Paul, Minnesota, or whether we were hunting buffalo and it happened to cross that arbitrary line that runs along the 49th parallel, those are all international activities that we undertook at that time. Louie Riel, everybody knows Louie Riel Jr., right? Louie Riel Sr. was also instrumental in some of these activities as well. Back in 1849, he helped to stand up for free trade rights in Red River, but throughout this whole territory, which included crossing that 49th parallel. There was a trial. A man by the name of Guillaume Sayer was charged with trading outside of the customed fur trade approved ways of doing business. And although he was found guilty, apparently at the time there was the courthouse, or wherever I think it was at Lower Fort Garry where they had the actual trial, and the building where the courthouse was taking place, there was 200 armed Métis hunters outside of this courthouse, and apparently he was found guilty, but he wasn't given any sentence. So he was basically set free, and afterwards the Métis hunters were shooting their guns up in the air, which they apparently did a few times, and they declared that that trade is free, le commerce est libre. So that was definitely a victory for us. But also in recent memory, there is I just have to point to a few people who are still leaders today. But in particular, I want to start off with our national president, Clement Chartrand, who is even, I think right now, in Peru, boning up on some of his Spanish so that he can continue to do this work at an international level. But if you look back at his CV, which I don't know if it's been made available or not, but it would be quite extensive. This man back in the 60s and 70s was doing work with the World Congress of Indigenous Peoples. He has done a lot of work at the United Nations and at the Organization of American States to work on both declarations on the rights of Indigenous peoples. And there's also a story, and I would never be able to tell it properly, but there's a story where he was in Nicaragua, get caught at that time, I think it was back in the 80s, I think he got caught in between some of the factions that were fighting at the time, and he had to literally dunk himself under the water in the river as the bullets were coming over his head. So this man has had quite the level of international experience as well. And then, of course, we have Paul Chartrand, who I think he took his law degree here as well, who has worked, and I think he worked with Willie on quite a bit on the United Nations Declaration. And then my president, David Chartrand, who is also very active at the international level. One of the things that he has tried to make a focus on is going back to the roots of the Métis Nations international activities, and that is trade and commerce. He has made trips to places like Colombia. I believe there's an upcoming trade mission to Peru and maybe some other places in South America, but he's not just going and talking to the government of Colombia or the government of Peru. He's going and speaking with the indigenous peoples who are in those countries. And he is working to help them build their economies so that we as a Métis Nation who live in a great country like Canada, where we have opportunities, can also work hand in hand with our Indigenous brothers and sisters in those countries to help them also find those economic opportunities. Because with economic opportunities comes things like education, comes things, you know, the importance of housing, which Kevin talked about earlier, which is, for me, as the Minister of Housing, is absolutely vital. Like, housing is the underlying foundation for all of these things that make us, could make us better people, but help our families succeed, help our children succeed, help our grandchildren succeed. If we have good housing where it's safe and warm and dry, then you can go to school and you can succeed in school, and you can become a lawyer, you can attend Robson, you can become a doctor, you can become a plumber, a carpenter. You can achieve your dreams when you have that warm and safe housing, which I know that Kevin, I got 2 minutes. I'm being told to wrap up here. I should not turn around, then I wouldn't have to look at these guys. So, but I am fairly close to being done here. But I just want to say it's a very distinct privilege for me to be here today. I was here Monday speaking at the Indigenous Student Center talking about the Métis Nation Homeland Map, which I know that there's some discussion on that happening in social media, and there's also maybe some disagreement about what we had proposed that our Métis Nation Homeland Map is about. I'll leave that for another day, but it was very much an honor for me to be here at the university, and I enjoy being here, and I hope that I didn't screw up too much today so that maybe someday I can get invited back again. So anyways, thanks very much. Everybody have a great 2 days. I'm heading out into the cold and maybe going ice fishing this afternoon. I'm trying to talk the people out of it, but it looks like that our youth are out in the lake today and they want to go and do some fishing, so I might be out there today. So anyways, thanks very much and have a great couple of days.